All right, so today we're diving into something that I think is super important, and that's how to really make the most of your research when you're writing those big academic papers.
Yeah.
It's not just about finding sources like anybody can Google stuff, but it's
Yeah.
about like being smart and efficient and effective with how you approach the whole research process.
Exactly. And for, you out there who want to really get a good grasp on information, but without feeling completely overwhelmed, right? This
Yeah.
deep dive is all about sort of giving you that clearer path through the world of academic research. We
Right.
want you to feel like confident and informed without getting totally lost in
In the weeds.
in the
Yeah.
weeds. Yeah, exactly.
So the guide that we're using for this deep dive is The College Writer, a guide by Van Rys and others from 2021.
Yes.
And we're going to be pulling out like the key strategies for planning your research,
Mm.
then actually doing the work of finding all those sources,
Mm-hmm.
and then thinking carefully about how to use them thoughtfully and ethically, right?
Absolutely.
So our aim here is to really distill the immediately useful insights from this book.
Yeah.
By the time we're done, you should have a much better sense of how to tackle those research projects, whether it's for a class or just for your own personal, quest for knowledge.
Or for your own curiosity. Exactly.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning
Okay.
with the planning stage.
Right.
It might seem kind of obvious,
Yeah.
but the book really emphasizes taking that time to properly understand what is actually being asked of you in the first place, right?
Yeah, that's like the absolute groundwork.
Right.
You really need to kind of dig into those assignment guidelines.
Yeah.
What is the instructor truly asking you to do?
Right.
What are the criteria they're going to use to, evaluate your work?
Yeah.
Getting that firm grasp on those expectations right away is going to save you so much potential headache down the line. It's
Yeah.
understanding the instructions before you start building something.
Exactly. And it's not just about the written instructions, is it?
No.
It's also thinking about what resources you actually have available to you.
Absolutely. Think broadly about what you have.
Yeah.
Libraries, of course, your college library, that's a primary resource.
Right.
But don't forget public libraries,
Yeah.
even specialized collections if your topic calls for it.
Right.
Then there's the online databases, right? Packed with scholarly articles,
Right.
all kinds of other valuable materials.
Hmm.
And, even think about your own connections.
Yeah.
Are there people in your network who might have knowledge or resources related to what you're researching?
Right, exactly. So it's sort of like doing an inventory of what's out there.
Uh-huh.
And then comes what I often find to be the most kind of engaging part,
Yeah.
which is actually choosing your subjects.
Uh-huh.
The guide talks about like brainstorming ideas and
Mhm.
even having discussions with other people about potential topics
Yes.
just to kind of get different angles, right?
That's such a valuable step.
Yeah.
Really is.
Especially, ones that might challenge your initial thoughts, right?
Yeah. Yeah, engaging with those contrasting viewpoints early on can really deepen your understanding of a topic,
Right.
help you see it from those multiple sides.
Yeah.
And it can also lead you to more interesting and focused research questions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
The guide also suggests doing some kind of initial exploratory research at this point.
Right.
Just sort of get a feel for what's out there and what aspects of the subject, really kind of grab your attention.
Yeah. And I think this early exploration is really key for helping you narrow your focus, right?
Yeah.
Because a topic that's like way too broad can just feel so overwhelming.
Yeah.
So from there, the guy talks about formulating a research question
Right.
or even like a preliminary thesis statement.
Yeah.
They give some really clear examples of
Yeah.
different kinds of research questions.
Yeah, they do a great job of illustrating that. They distinguish between questions of fact,
Right.
which are looking for, a very direct answer. Like they
Mhm.
say, how long did Kim Jong-il rule North Korea?
Right.
Right? There's a specific answer to that.
Yeah.
Then you have questions of interpretation,
Right.
which require more analysis.
Yeah.
Like, how did Kim Jong-il maintain power?
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then finally, they emphasize the importance of, that main research question, which is kind of like the central driving force for your whole research.
No.
Like they give the example, should consumers buy hydrogen fuel cell cars?
Right.
Something like that,
Yeah.
which is a very, kind of complex question that needs to be unpacked.
Right. And then that main question leads to all those more specific secondary questions.
Exactly.
Right. The kind that really help you break down that larger issue into more manageable parts.
Yeah.
And they use the classic 5 Ws and H.
Right.
So who, what, when, where, why, and how, in relation to those hydrogen fuel cell cars, asking things like, who developed them? What exactly are they? When and where were they developed and used? Why are they being developed? How do they actually function?
Yeah.
It's a very practical framework, I think, for just thinking about what information you need to actually uncover.
Exactly. And once you have, that focused question
Right.
and a clearer idea of the information you're going to be seeking,
Yeah.
the guide stresses the value of developing a research plan.
Yeah.
And even like putting together a project proposal.
Right.
Now, that might sound very formal,
Yeah.
but, at its heart, it's really just about having a structured approach to your research.
Right. It's like creating a basic outline.
Yeah, think of it as an outline for your investigation. Exactly.
Yeah. And they even provide a sample research proposal.
Yeah.
And it's for analyzing Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, cool.
Both a novel and a specific film adaptation.
Nice.
What I found particularly helpful about that example was seeing how they included like a timeline with specific dates
Oh, that's great.
for completing the different stages of the project.
Yeah.
It really highlights how important managing your time is
Yes. Time management is key.
when you're doing research.
Absolutely.
Because it can be so easy to just sort of like get lost in the,
Yeah.
get lost in the details.
In the rabbit holes.
In the rabbit holes, exactly.
Breaking it down into smaller tasks with their own deadlines can make the whole thing feel less intimidating.
Yes. And it's about creating a step-by-step guide for yourself,
Uh-huh.
for your research journey, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got our plan mapped out.
Okay.
Now it's time to actually get into the research itself,
Right.
to really dive deeper into our topic.
Let's dive in.
The guide starts this section by discussing the research frame of mind.
Okay.
And I just thought that was such an insightful way to kind of begin.
Yeah, what do they say about that?
Well, they talk about, in today's environment where we're just like constantly bombarded with information,
Right.
not all of it reliable.
Yeah, so much information.
Having this like thoughtful approach to research is more essential than ever.
Absolutely.
So they really emphasize cultivating curiosity,
Uh-huh.
like a genuine desire to actually understand your subject on a deeper level,
Yes.
and the importance of having a systematic method for finding those answers,
Yeah.
and a commitment to accuracy in your search for information.
Right.
They even touch on the challenges of misinformation
Yeah.
and how critical it is to be really discerning in your selection of sources.
Absolutely.
And for me, a key point here is that research isn't just about like fulfilling the requirements of an assignment.
Right.
It's about actually expanding your own understanding.
Yes.
And contributing to the understanding of others who will eventually read your work.
Right? That's a really important perspective.
Like it's about engaging with, this existing body of knowledge
Uh-huh.
and building upon it.
Yes.
So to kind of facilitate that process of discovery, the guide then goes into detail about understanding different types of sources. You might encounter, and this is a really foundational concept in academic research.
Yes, it is.
So we're talking about primary, secondary, and tertiary sources.
Yeah.
The guide makes it clear that for most college-level work, your focus is primarily going to be on those primary and secondary sources.
Okay.
So can you explain a little bit about the key differences between those for us?
Yeah, so a primary source offers like direct firsthand information related to your topic.
Okay.
So it's like the original material,
Right.
the closest to the event, the idea or question you're investigating.
Got it.
Think of things like, original documents like the text of Pride and Prejudice itself,
Yeah.
personal correspondence,
Mhm.
interviews you conduct, data you collect from surveys, or even like your own observations,
Okay.
things like that.
So that's primary.
And then secondary sources are where someone else analyzes or interprets those primary sources.
Okay.
Right.
So
So
it's one step removed.
it's one step removed. Yeah.
So a literary critic writing about the themes in Pride and Prejudice,
Yeah.
or a historian analyzing letters from a particular historical period.
Exactly.
Those would be examples of secondary sources.
That's right.
Okay, and then tertiary sources,
Right.
which the guide notes are generally not suitable for college assignments,
Right.
are things like encyclopedias
Right.
or textbooks that summarize information that's drawn from both primary and secondary sources.
Exactly.
Got
So it's like, the most kind of general overview,
Right.
tertiary.
The guide also briefly mentions the advantages and disadvantages of doing primary research.
Yeah.
So while it can provide like really amazing information that's perfectly tailored to your specific research question,
Uh-huh.
it can also be quite time intensive
Yeah.
and may require, specialized skills in data collection or
So-
analysis.
Absolutely.
So that's a crucial trade-off to kind of weigh. when you're planning your research strategy, right?
Right.
Now, once you have a good understanding of the different types of sources, the next challenge is actually like locating them. Where do you find this stuff?
How do you find it?
So the guide offers a really comprehensive overview of the various places you can look
Okay.
for information.
Yeah.
It really is like, I was really impressed.
Where do they start?
Well, they start with the traditional cornerstone of research,
Okay.
which are libraries.
Libraries, of course.
And it reminds us to think beyond just our college library
Uh-huh.
to include public libraries and even specialized libraries, depending on your topic.
Right. Specialized collections,
Right.
if you need.
Exactly. And it also emphasizes the wide range of research tools that libraries offer,
Yeah.
especially those online catalogs and these subscription databases.
Yeah.
They mention names like LexisNexis, Ibiesco Host, ProQuest Direct,
Right.
which can be just incredibly powerful resources.
They really are.
And it's important not to overlook those valuable services that libraries provide,
Uh-huh.
like interlibrary loan if they don't have a specific resource that you need,
Right.
and the expert assistance you can get at the reference desk.
Yeah, librarians are research specialists, you know?
And the guide even points to the Library of Congress subject headings
Yes.
as a tool for discovering relevant keywords, which is such a practical tip.
Yeah, really useful.
For more effective searching,
Uh-huh.
then of course we have computer resources,
Right.
which for many of us is the first place we think to look.
Yeah, the internet.
The internet, email, those limited access databases we just talked about,
Uh-huh.
and even things like discussion groups,
Yeah.
websites, blogs, social networks, YouTube podcasts.
Right.
Like the list is extensive,
It's vast.
right? And it's a vast and sometimes overwhelming landscape,
Yeah, it really is.
which is why the critical evaluation of those sources, which we'll talk about a little bit later,
Yeah.
becomes so vital.
This is so important.
The guide also reminds us not to forget about like traditional mass media.
Right.
Radio, television, and print sources like newspapers, magazines, and scholarly journals can still be incredibly relevant depending on your research focus. And the guide goes even further,
Oh, wow.
listing places like testing and training sites,
Right.
research centers, universities, think tanks,
Uh-huh.
even conventions and conferences, museums,
Yeah.
government offices, publications from businesses and nonprofits.
Wow.
It really underscores the idea that research material can be found in like a surprising number of places
It really does.
if you know what you're looking for.
If you know where to look.
Right.
Yeah.
So once you have a sense of like where to look,
Right.
the next essential skill is knowing how to search effectively.
Yeah. And that leads us to the topic of keyword strategies.
Keyword strategies. Okay.
This is where those Library of Congress subject headings
Mhm.
that we mentioned earlier can be particularly helpful.
Right.
The guide explains the importance of like getting familiar with the specific database or resource you're using,
Yeah.
understanding the kind of content it holds, the time periods it covers, and how its search functions actually operate.
They also suggest starting with like a broader initial search,
Yeah.
using your most obvious keywords,
Right.
and then kind of refining your search based on the results you get.
Right. Sort of like a narrowing down process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If your first attempt doesn't yield much,
Yeah.
try using related terms or synonyms.
Uh-huh.
And once you do find some relevant sources, pay attention to the subject headings and keywords that they use,
Right.
because those can give you clues for further searches.
That's a great tip.
And then there are those incredibly useful Boolean operators, and not.
Yes.
The guide provides some clear examples of how using these,
Uh-huh.
along with quotation marks for searching exact phrases,
Right.
can significantly narrow or broaden your search results
Yes.
and make them much more targeted.
Very specific.
So, for example, searching for buffalo and bison will give you results that include both terms,
Yeah.
whereas buffalo or bison will give you results that include either term.
Right.
You see the difference?
Yeah, so you can be very precise
Exactly.
with what you're looking for.
And mastering those keyword strategies is a real game changer in terms of making your research process more efficient and effective.
Absolutely.
Now, once you've located a potential source, your work isn't finished.
Yeah.
You need to evaluate it critically.
Critically evaluate.
And this is such a crucial step, especially given the sheer volume of information
Yeah.
we have access to today.
Right.
So the guide provides a really helpful set of questions
Okay.
to consider when evaluating a source.
Right.
The first is what they call assignment fit.
Assignment fit.
Does this source actually address your research question,
Uh-huh.
and meet the requirements of your assignment.
Right, because it might be a great source, but if it's not relevant,
Totally.
it's not going to help you.
Right, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Then they discuss the credible author.
Credible author.
So is the author an expert in the field? What are their qualifications or credentials?
Right. Do they have the expertise?
Can you find information that verifies their expertise?
Uh-huh.
So they use the example of like an automotive engineer
Right.
would be a credible source on hydrogen fuel cell technology,
Okay.
as opposed to like someone with no background.
Yeah, someone random on the internet.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Next up is reliable publication.
Reliable publication.
So was this source published by a reputable academic press,
Uh-huh.
a peer-reviewed journal, or a well-known and trusted news organization?
Okay.
You know, where did you find this resource? Was it in a respected library database?
Right.
Or was it on like a personal blog?
Yeah, big difference.
Right, huge difference.
Okay.
Then there's the question of current information.
Current information.
So is the information in the source up to date for your topic?
Okay.
For instance, you know, research on computer technology from a decade ago
Right.
might be outdated,
Uh-huh.
whereas a historical analysis from that same period
Yeah.
could still be very valuable.
Exactly. It depends
Yeah.
on what you're looking for.
It all depends.
Yeah.
Then comes the question of accurate information.
Accurate information.
So are there any obvious factual errors or inconsistencies
Right.
or flawed data presented in the source?
Yeah, you always got to check for that.
And then, is there full logical support?
The logical support.
Are the claims that are being made, is the author backing up their points with evidence?
Yeah.
And does their reasoning actually make sense?
Does it hold up to scrutiny?
Right.
Yeah.
They also mention the importance of quality writing and design.
Okay.
So is the source well written and clearly presented? Because sometimes poor writing
Yeah.
can be an indication of, you know, poor thinking
Yeah.
or a lack of rigor.
Or just sloppiness.
Right.
Yeah.
And finally, they suggest considering the source's relationship with other sources.
Okay.
So does it align with other credible sources you found?
Uh-huh.
Or does it offer like a reasoned and evidence-based disagreement?
Right. So does it kind of like fit in with
Right?
the overall conversation?
With the larger conversation that's
Yeah.
happening.
Right.
And for those free online sources
Yeah.
that we all use,
Mm.
the guide has some additional specific checks,
Okay.
like seeing if a clear author is identified
Right.
who sponsors the website,
Yeah.
looking for an About Us page
Uh-huh.
that provides information about the site's purpose and credibility,
Right.
and making sure that the links within the site are still active.
Yeah. Good point.
You know, all those things that can kind of give you a clue about
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
reliability of the website.
Those are all good red flags.
Right.
Or green flags, hopefully.
With green flags, exactly.
Okay. So you've found your sources.
Okay.
And you've evaluated them.
Right.
Now, how do you actually like engage with them?
Right.
How do you read them?
How do you really dig in?
Yeah.
So the guide emphasizes active reading and interaction,
Okay.
not just passively absorbing information.
Right. You got to be thinking.
Right. You have to be like actively thinking about what you're reading.
Processing it?
Exactly.
Okay.
So they suggest first determining if a source is even worth a deep read
Right.
by looking at the title, the abstract, the publication date.
Yeah.
Skim it
Mm-hmm.
before you commit to like a thorough reading.
Don't waste your time
Right.
if it's not relevant.
Right.
Yeah.
As you read, mark key passages
Okay.
with notes or highlighting.
Uh-huh.
Take a moment to consider the author's background.
Right.
Try to understand their purpose in writing and who their intended audience is.
Yeah, because that can color how they present the information.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And importantly, constantly ask yourself, why is this important?
Good question.
And what are the implications of this information?
Yes. What are the implications?
So you're really like actively engaging with,
Yeah, you're not just like taking it in.
like
but
wrestling with it.
You're wrestling with it exactly.
Okay.
And then comes the crucial process of note-taking.
Note taking.
Okay.
The guide highlights the importance of clearly distinguishing between the source material itself
Yeah,
and your own thoughts and ideas as you're taking notes,
that's a really good point.
right? Because it can be so easy to get those mixed up.
Yeah, especially when you're like, deep in it
Right.
and you're kind of like, synthesizing everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they recommend using quotation marks for any direct quotes,
Right.
developing your own system of abbreviations or codes,
Mhm.
or even using separate columns in your notebook or digital document
Okay.
to separate source material from your own analysis.
Right.
And they really stress the need for accurate transcription of the source material when you're then moving into the drafting stage of your own work.
Right. You don't want to be like misquoting or
Exactly.
misrepresenting something.
You don't want to misrepresent anything.
Yeah.
And within note-taking,
Okay.
the guide outlines the 3 key ways of incorporating source material into your own writing.
All right.
So summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting.
Okay, the big 3.
Right.
Yeah.
They explain what each of those involves
Uh-huh.
and when it's most appropriate to use each one.
Okay.
So summarizing is providing a condensed overview of the main points.
Right.
Paraphrasing is restating the information in your own words while preserving the original meaning.
Uh-huh.
And quoting is using the exact words from the source.
Got it.
They even include a sample passage about GM's fuel cell technology,
Okay.
and then provide examples of how that same passage could be summarized, paraphrased, and quoted.
Oh, cool.
It's a really clear demonstration of the differences between those techniques.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
And the guide also wisely advises us to always maintain the original context of the source material
Right.
and to avoid misrepresenting the author's ideas.
Yeah, you don't want to twist their words,
That's
exactly,
right.
take things out of context.
Right, regardless of which method you choose.
Okay.
Now, the guide also goes into the realm of primary research,
Primary research.
which is when you go out and collect your own original data.
Right. And this can take several different forms. Yeah, like what? So like conducting experiments
Experiments.
where you're systematically testing hypotheses.
Mhm.
And the guide reminds us of the importance of, starting with a reliable methodology,
Yeah.
striving for objectivity in your data collection and analysis,
Ah,
and conducting thorough background research
right.
before you even begin your experiment.
So you kind of know what you're getting into.
Right.
Yeah.
Then there are surveys
Surveys.
where you're gathering data by asking people a set of questions.
Uh-huh.
The guide discusses the difference between closed questions,
Okay.
which offer a limited set of answer choices,
Right.
and open-ended questions,
Mhm.
which allow for more detailed and nuanced responses.
Okay.
They also provide some really practical advice on, like, designing effective surveys,
Okay.
starting with a clear introduction, and instructions,
Yeah.
organizing the questions logically,
Uh-huh.
moving from simpler to more complex inquiries.
And always pilot testing your survey
Oh, yeah.
before you distribute it widely.
Good point.
How to test it out.
You don't want to just send it out to like hundreds of people and then
Right.
realize
That it's all messed
it's
up.
all messed up, right?
Yeah.
Another important type of primary research is the analysis of documents and artifacts.
Documents and artifacts.
Here, the guide emphasizes considering both the external context.
Right.
So that's like the who, what, when, where, why, and how surrounding the creation of the document or artifact.
Okay, so like the historical context?
Right, the historical context, exactly.
And then internal.
And the internal context, which is the actual content, the structure and composition of the thing itself.
Yeah.
They use Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman
Okay.
as a compelling example
Uh-huh.
of a text that can be analyzed in this way.
Yeah. Really interesting.
Right. And then there's conducting interviews,
Interviews.
which involves speaking directly with individuals.
Who have expertise or relevant experience
Mm-hmm.
related to your research topic.
Yeah.
And thorough preparation is key here,
Mm-hmm.
including thoughtfully arranging the interview,
Right.
developing those well-structured questions.
Yeah.
Again, using that 5 W's and H framework can be really helpful here.
Yeah.
Taking careful notes during the interview,
Right.
practicing active listening,
Mm-hmm.
and always obtaining permission before recording.
Yeah, that's important.
Right. You don't want to just start recording someone
No,
without their consent.
definitely not.
They even provide some sample interview questions related to hybrid vehicles, as an example.
Okay.
And finally, in the area of primary research, the guide discusses making observations.
Observations.
Now, this can involve different levels of participation,
Okay.
from being a direct participant to a non-participant observer.
Uh-huh.
And the observation itself can be overt or covert.
Right.
So the guide highlights the need for careful planning here,
Okay.
including background research,
Yeah.
defining your specific questions,
Hmm.
obtaining any necessary permissions,
Right.
considering safety protocols,
Hmm.
determining the appropriate timing and duration of your observation,
Yeah.
and identifying the tools you'll need.
Okay.
And they also emphasize the importance of being both adaptable and focused during the observation process.
Right.
So all of these methods of primary research
Yeah.
can yield incredible valuable and original insights.
Mm-hmm.
But as the guide points out, they do require careful planning
Yeah,
and execution.
absolutely.
So now, as you're in the process of gathering all of these sources,
Right.
the guide introduces this concept of creating an annotated bibliography.
Okay. An annotated bibliography.
And this is more than just a simple list
Okay.
of the sources you've consulted.
Yeah.
It's a working document
Mm-hmm.
that includes your own, brief summaries and evaluations of each resource
Right.
and how it relates to your research.
All right.
The guide explains that this demonstrates to your instructor that you've conducted a thorough review of the relevant literature and that you've engaged critically with your sources.
So it shows you've done your homework.
Exactly.
Okay.
They outline the key elements of an annotated bibliography,
Right.
which include the complete bibliographic information for each source,
Yeah.
formatted according to the citation style you're using,
Mm-hmm.
followed by the annotation itself.
Right.
This annotation typically includes a concise description of the source,
Okay.
a summary of its main arguments or findings,
Mm-hmm.
an assessment of its usefulness and value for your specific research project,
Right.
a discussion of its perspective or point of view,
Oh, okay.
and an evaluation of its overall quality and reliability.
So it's quite a detailed annotation.
It is.
Yeah.
They even provide a sample annotated bibliography entry for Alice Munro's collection, Runaway,
Oh, cool.
which really helps to illustrate what these annotations should look like.
That-
Excellent.